When I was 25 years old, my beautiful wife and I spent our first Christmas together as a married couple. And just so you know, today is also her birthday, so if you get a chance, wish her a happy birthday. But we spent our first Christmas together as a married couple, and we went to the great metropolis of Stratford, Texas. Population, maybe 1,900. Okay, and I imagine that Stratford looks a lot like what Moscow would look like without the university and without any trees or hills. Okay, Stratford is a small farm town. Everybody is pretty much either in farming or ranching. My grandfather owned the John Deere dealership most of my life. Okay, so we went there, and my family knew, like, we're first married, my wife's still in school, I'm working full-time at a summer camp, so they basically gave us cash or gift cards for our Christmas. And it amounted to about $1,000, which was most of what I made in a month. And I took that money and I put it in my wallet for safekeeping. Now, the other thing I love to do when I go visit my grandfather or my grandparents is my grandfather and I love to go hunting. We love to go pheasant hunting. And when we first started, I was really young, and he and I would walk with the dog and we would try to get up birds. At about this time, and as it got later, what he would do is he would drive and drop me off at one end of a fence row with the dog, and then he would drive down to the other and just let us push all the birds to him. So he did less walking, I did more. And so we decided we were going to go hunting because that's what I wanted to do. The problem is I also carry my hunting license in my wallet, and I have to take it with me. So we go out and we covered about 15 sections that day. For those of you that are a little bit younger, think about 25,000 steps. Okay? I walked mile after mile after mile looking for pheasants. When we finished and we came back home that evening, I realized I've lost my wallet. And I am devastated. And so the next morning we get up early and we head out. And I'm telling you, I tracked every step I made. I looked for every print I made in the dirt. We stopped at every place in the truck. I stood in the back of the pickup, leaned over the hood like this, and pointed, go this way, this is where we went. Looking for a brown leather wallet in the dirt. Nothing. We got to the last place, which was this corn stubble field with a tailwater pit at one end. And we got out and we went around the tailwater pit just like we did. And now I'm already just losing it. You know what I mean? I'm so just like, there's no way that I had it in my back pocket all day. And then now I get here and I've lost it. Like, there's no way I have a better chance of being struck by lightning than losing it right here at the end. So after the tailwater pit, I kind of lose interest. My grandfather's like, where did you go? I'm like, I just went over there and walked down that corn row. I only went about 100 feet. And I turned around and came back. He said, where? And I was like, just over there. And he goes, show me. And I was like, oh, fine. So I walk over and I was like, this one. I walked down this about 100 feet. That's it. That's all I did, Pop. There's no way it's right here. He goes, well, let's go look. And so we're walking down. He's asked me, did you veer off? Did you go out? And I was like, no, I didn't do anything. And I look up ahead and I see this little orange thing laying on the ground. And I realize that's the sleeve that my hunting license goes in, sticking out of my wallet. And I go, it's all right, Pop, I see it. It's laying up there on the ground. And he said, are you serious? He's like, no, it's not. I was like, yeah, it really is. And he was like, I can't believe it. He said, I was going to replace all of that for you because that's the kind of guy he was. But he said, I was going to make you look. And we walked down, and I picked it up, and I'm telling you, it had to have been the place where I stepped and turned around and somehow fell out. It might even have been past where I walked. Like, it was literally the last step that I made. So we drive back, we're having dinner, I'm telling everybody about how we found it or stuff. And then afterwards I was praying, I was thanking God, like, God, thank you so much for helping me. And then all of a sudden I stopped and I was like, now wait a minute. What was this about anyway? Like, what did I do that you made me wander around all day looking for this wallet? Like, what was the purpose of this, God? And God said to me, Ben, have you ever looked for me this hard? And I was like, And I want you to be thinking about that. Like, when God seems distant, or when you really need him and it seems like he's listening or not listening, how hard do you look for him? How hard do you go out and try to find him? Keep that in mind as we go through our text today. We are in Matthew chapter 15, starting in verse 21. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Jesus didn't answer a word. So the disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Yes, it is, Lord. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And her daughter was healed at that moment. Now, I have a confession to make. Matthew is probably my favorite book in the Bible. I spend the most time reading Matthew. If I read something in another gospel, I always come back to Matthew and read it there too, if it's in there. I love Matthew. So if I haven't read this story 1,000 times, it's really close. But I've always just kind of considered this a throwaway story, right? It's just something that happens in the middle. It's kind of a transition, you're moving, and I just read over it. It's kind of like my friend Rusty Baker. Rusty Baker? Rusty, want to stand up? I'm doing that because a few weeks ago I preached and I said my friend Rusty and I went to Egypt and Jordan together. Or I just said my friend. Y'all, he has cried about that and cried and cried. He's like, I think he's in therapy now over it. So don't mess with a guy with a microphone because it's like fighting gravity. You're going down, I promise. But Rusty and I went to Egypt and Jordan in March, and we went to the pyramids, we went to Saqqara, we went to the Grand Egyptian Museum. You see, Egypt has 1/3 of all the world's ancient monuments. And one town, Luxor, has 1/6 of all the monuments. We went to Luxor, we went to Karnak Temple, Luxor Temple, Deir el-Bahari, Deir el-Medina. We went to the Valley of the Kings. We went to the Ramesseum. We went to the Colossus of Midnight, the temple after temple, Edfu, Komombo. And at first you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. How did they build this? 7 days in, when you see the next temple, you're like, it's kind of like in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they're forced to eat Robin's minstrels and there's much rejoicing, and you're like, yay, another temple. And so that's really how I felt about this. I was like, yay, another miracle. We've seen Jesus cast out better demons. Matter of fact, in the last chapter, Jesus gave the disciples authority to cast out demons. We even saw in Matthew chapter 8 where Jesus casts out a whole legion of demons at the same time. So I've always just kind of read over this to get to the next part because it's not that big of a miracle. I mean, I'm sure to the lady and her daughter it was life-changing. But for me, I've always just kind of skipped over. So when I found out I was preaching this, I was going in a different direction. And then God started to work on me. And I realized we have to look at this not just in the context of the first century, but in the context of what's happening in Matthew. Okay? So Matthew is 28 chapters long. In chapter 14, halfway through, Jesus sends the disciples out with the authority to cast out demons and to preach the kingdom of God. And John the Baptist is murdered, and everything changes. We've had arguments with the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. We've had these intense kind of scuffles, but now the kingdom is a matter of life and death. John has lost his life for it. And I can imagine Jesus also can see his life and his death coming soon. And the disciples aren't ready. I have to get them ready, Jesus is thinking. So he says this, when he finds out about John, he says, let's go away to a solitary place. And they get in the boat and they start out. The problem is Galilee's not very big. And so the people on the land can see them in the boat moving and they just run ahead of them and get there. And when Jesus gets out, he has compassion on these people and he feeds 5,000 people with a lunch. And then he says to the disciples, I know you're really tired. Get in the boat, go to Capernaum. I'll meet you there after I dismiss the crowd. He dismisses the crowd and he goes up on the mountainside to pray. And he's watching the disciples in the water, in a storm, and they keep rowing and getting farther and farther and farther away from Capernaum. And Jesus just watches all night. And just before dawn, he walks out to them on the water, and they are terrified. But when Peter sees him, Peter says, Lord, I want to be your disciple. I want to be like you. Tell me to come to you, and I'll walk on the water just like you. That's what a disciple does. And Jesus says, come on. And Peter gets out and walks on the water for a minute. And then he starts to sink before Jesus, and he says, Lord, save me. And Jesus grabs him, pulls him up, puts him back in the boat. Jesus calms the storm, and finally the disciples say, surely you are the Son of God. They finally get it. And so Jesus says, okay, well, let's go to Gennesaret instead. They land at Gennesaret. It was closer by then. And so they land at Gennesaret. They get out, there's another crowd, and Jesus begins to have compassion and do miracles for them. But the Pharisees come, and even though they see these miracles, they're not impressed because the disciples are eating with unwashed hands. Doesn't matter that Jesus is doing real things, that's changing real lives. Your hands aren't clean when you eat. And Jesus puts them in their place. And the disciples come to him after and say, they were pretty upset about this. And he's like, I don't care. They're blind guides, leave them. And then the disciples have to admit, we also don't know what you were talking about. And Jesus says, you guys really aren't the brightest bulbs in the drawer, are you? He says, are you so dull? And he explains it to him and he says, okay, but now we really have to get away. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this place and we're going to travel to the region of Tyre and Sidon. I think we have a map coming up. So we leave Gennesaret right here on the northwestern shore of Galilee, about kind of near where Capernaum is, and we walk all the way up to the coast of the Mediterranean where it says Tyre and Sidon, somewhere in that vicinity. I know they're kind of apart, but roughly in that area, somewhere between 35 and 50 miles. And this is where I realized there's something else going on here, because for that 35 plus mile walk, Jesus doesn't say a word. We're going to turn around and walk back to the place called the Decapolis over here, at least 50 more miles. And again, Jesus isn't going to say a word. Now, maybe he does teach in this time, but Matthew doesn't want you to get confused all the other things that could be happening with this one story that's so important. So what's so important that we would have to walk 100 miles for? And I think, if I was one of the disciples, this would have been one I probably sat out. I would be like, Jesus, 100 miles, one teaching. How about this? My leg is bothering me. Oh, I'll stay here. And you guys just tell me about it when you get back. It's a long way to walk for one thing. But there's something really important happening. And they get there, and now this is Gentile country. It's called Phoenicia. There shouldn't be any Jews here because they don't want to be unclean. Remember, they don't want to eat with unwashed hands. They certainly don't want to buy food that was made by a Gentile. They don't want to sleep in a Gentile's house. They don't want to come into contact with it. They could become unclean. So he knows the Jews aren't going to follow us up here. We will be alone, and no one will know who we are. And I can do stuff just with you. Only that's not what happens either. We get there, and a Canaanite woman, a Gentile woman. Now, the Canaanites are the ancestral enemies of the Jews because Israel, before it becomes Israel, is the land of Canaan. And when God brings them out in the Exodus, he says, you have to get rid of all the Canaanites. Don't let any of them stay in the land. And the Jews start out doing this really well until they don't. And then what they do is instead they move the 7 Canaanite nations into that blue or the purple space called the Decapolis. And they call it the land of the Gerasenes or Gadarenes, which means the land of the expelled ones, because those were the ones who were supposed to be expelled. And when Jesus shows up here the first time, he expels a legion of demons and then is himself expelled from the land. Okay? So we get there, and this Canaanite woman, she is calling out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, we've heard this before. This is the third time, actually, that somebody has asked Jesus, knelt at his feet, asked him to have mercy on him. So we go back and look at those other 2 times, we should know exactly what he's going to do here. And we go back and we see that he immediately has compassion on them. He immediately meets their need and says, according to your faith, let it be done for you. And their things are changed. But he doesn't do that here. He doesn't say a word. It gets so bad, she's crying out so much that the disciples finally come to Jesus and say, send her away, she's crying out after us. Now the good thing the disciples did is it appears as though they're saying, do what she asked and send her away, because Jesus' response is, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Now on the other side of that, it doesn't seem to be because they're compassionate at all towards this woman and her cries. They seem to be afraid. We are no longer in Israel. She is calling you the Lord. She's calling you the Son of David. Like, we are in a dangerous place for those words to be coming out of her mouth. If people catch on, it's just you and us here, Jesus. We could be in real trouble. Send her away. But she doesn't care. She's like, hey, somebody's on my team. She runs up and sinks before Jesus and says, Lord, help me. And I'm always drawn back to that point where Peter's in the boat and he's walking out on the water to Jesus and he begins to sink and he says, Lord, save me. But still, Jesus doesn't do it. His response to her is, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Let me explain to you how I visualize this in my head. I don't have any proof of this, so don't come argue with me after. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just saying this is how I visualize it. I visualize that from the time the disciples come and start speaking to Jesus, he never takes his eyes off of them. Let me explain why. There's 2 things I think that could be happening here. 1, Jesus is having to deal with the death of his cousin and friend John the Baptist. He's having to see his mission ahead. The disciples aren't ready. His death is coming. He knows all this stuff that's happening. Like, he's having to deal with that. So it's possible that she's had to remind him of the character of God. I think that's possible. There's another possibility. It's also possible this isn't for her. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the miracle is for her and her daughter. But I think the teaching is for the disciples. So the disciples come to Jesus and they say, send her away. She's crying out after us. And he looks at them and he's like, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. She comes up and falls at his feet. Help me. And he says, it isn't right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. And she's like, yes, it is, Lord. Yes, it is. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. In God's house, even the least of these are taken care of. Even the dogs. Everyone has a place in God's house. That's who he is. And I think finally Jesus smiles at the disciples and says, woman, you have great faith. And I think what he's trying to do, if you remember, Peter wanted to walk on the water to be like Jesus. Jesus gave them authority to drive out demons. And I think the reason Jesus isn't asking is because he wants to see how they will respond. Will you be like me and have compassion? Why aren't you moved by her cries? Why am I not moved by her cries? If you want to be like me and you want to do what I do, what are you waiting for? You've seen me drive out demons. You have authority. Drive it out. Because he says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel, but you will be sent to the ends of the earth. And when she cries out, help me, he still tries to give them a chance. He says, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Like, I think Jesus is still waiting to see what the disciples will do, but they won't do anything. And finally, her answer moves him so much that he does it. And like that, her daughter is healed. Because she's standing on the character of God and who he is. She says, this is who you are, God. This is what happens in your house. And I'm not leaving until you do what you say. Now, make no mistake, God does not have to do what you say. He does not have to be who you say he is. He's not a genie. You don't rub the lamp and get wishes. But God has to be who he says he is. The text tells us God cannot tell a lie. If he says, I will do this, then he has to do it. And this is the second time that we see a story like this play out. Matthew is pretty clear in his language that he wants you to connect this to another story back in Matthew 8, where a centurion, another Gentile, comes to Jesus because he has a servant who is paralyzed and suffering terribly. And Jesus, again, responds a little bit out of character. He basically says, you want me to come with you? You realize I could become unclean for that. And the centurion says, no, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But I also know what it is to be in authority. I tell this one, go, and he goes. I say to that one, come, and he comes. I tell my servant, do this, and he does it. Just say the word, and he will be healed. And Jesus turns to the disciples and says, I have never seen such faith in all of Israel. And his servant is healed at that moment. And Jesus leaves that place and goes to the Decapolis. We're going to leave this place with her and go straight to the Decapolis. What will we find? Now, I want you to see something else. This woman keeps crying out, have mercy on me. Have mercy on me. Maybe she gets that from Psalm 4. It says this, answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. Remember, she has a daughter and she is desperate for her. So maybe she gets it from Psalm 6. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long? Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Maybe she gets it from Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Maybe she gets it from Psalm 57. Have mercy on me, my God, have mercy on me. For in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I cry out to the God Most High, to God who vindicates me. But wait a minute. She's a Gentile. She shouldn't know these words at all. These should not be things that have come out of her mouth. So how does she know them? It's possible she's a God-fearer, a Gentile who worships the God of Israel. This is a good possibility. But even if that's true, how did she become a God-fearer? I think the only way is that she had to have had a friend who happened to be Jewish, who cared about her. That maybe she went to and said, "What do I do? I'm losing my girl. What do I do?" Maybe her friend said, "When I am desperate and in need, I know that God cannot turn away, so I cry out these words." And maybe she told her about the words from Psalm 86. "Hear me, Lord, and answer me, for I'm afflicted and in need. Guard my life, for I'm faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. You, Lord, are forgiving and good." Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. For when I am in distress, I call to you because you answer me. Now, maybe all she remembered was, "Have mercy on me, Lord." And just to keep crying out, because she cries out over and over, she is not going away until God does what he says he will do, till God behaves according to his character. And for some reason, the disciples don't see it. They don't see God's character in the same way that she does. And I wonder, do we? Do you stand on God's character and know that he has to be who he says he is? Or do sometimes we think if we just keep crying out, he will hear us? Meanwhile, we cannot hear the cries of the people around us. Why aren't we moved? What will it take to move the disciples to compassion for this woman? They think they've seen the least of these. They haven't seen anything yet. Jesus says, "Look at her faith. Why aren't you moved?" She knows God's character better than they do. Now, in just a second, we're going to take communion, but I want you to think about this. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about God's character, about what he says. God says this in Psalm 34. "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to blot out their name from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. For the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit." That's who God is. That's who he says he is. That's who he has to be. Do we stand on that? Now you may say, "Ben, but I'm not righteous." I thought that too. When I became a Christian in college, I thought righteousness had to do with sinlessness. If I have sin in my life, how can I be righteous? But I came across a couple verses that I started me thinking. One is, "The righteous shall live by faith." And I thought, yeah, if I'm righteous, then I'll live in this great faith. But then I came across another verse that said, "Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness." And I realized It's not so much that the righteous live by faith, but that those who live by faith will be seen as righteous because the sin part has already been taken care of. The only evidence that we have that this woman had any righteousness at all, being a Gentile, is that she had great faith. Enough that God walked 100 miles just for her. Do we have that kind of faith? Do we stand on who God says that he is and cry out until he does what he says he will do? In God's great compassion, in his abounding love for us, and according to his character, he sent Jesus. And on the night Jesus was betrayed by those he loved, he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. And he said, "This is my body given for you. Do this and remember me." Let's remember. And then he took the cup. He said, "This is the cup of my blood, poured out for you and for many. When you do this, remember me." Don't just remember who I was. Remember who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be like me. Remember me so that you can do it too. Because you're supposed to be like me. I ask you to love those who hate you because that's what I do. God loves those who hate him. So he calls us to do the same. Let us remember. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe. Father God, I pray that you would help us to always remember who you are and what you've done. God, move us as we leave this place, as we go out, as we hear the cries of the people around us. God, do not let us do that without compassion. Let us be moved, for we want to be like you. Let us be people of great faith, so that your name will be praised. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.